I am a bit nervous about today's video, and it has nothing to do with the preventative maintenance we'll be performing, the water pump, the fuel pump, etc. These I expect will be very easy swaps. But we're also going to be changing the oil in this engine, and I'm hoping we don't see glitter. So to catch you up to speed, we have already disassembled the entire front end of this crash-damaged manual Audi S5. And I gotta say, it is very strange being able to walk up right against the block of this engine. But obviously, we have much more access to pretty much everything we're going to want to take care of preventative-wise in this video. So the water pump behind this pulley here, we've got to do a tensioner here for the supercharger. That's going to be reinstalled. The fuel pump's going to be replaced, as well as the connector that sheared off during the crash. We'll also take care of the thermostat, which is underneath the supercharger, and check for carbon buildup. We'll see how bad that is and decide if we want to tackle the carbon cleaning now or later. We also spent quite a bit of time cleaning up this interior, and I've got to say I'm in love. Seeing that 6-speed manual paired with a very, very clean B8.5 interior is just that's creme de la creme for me. I love this version of Audi interiors. But here's the thing, it doesn't make a ton of sense to swap the water pump, the fuel pump, the belts, pulleys, if the engine oil suggests that this engine is on its way out. Remember, this is 140,000 miles. That is a lot for any German engine, modern or not. And I'm curious if the oil in here looks clean. We're also going to check the oil filter. Of course, we're going to do a full oil change service. I already have the kit. But it doesn't make any sense to move further with this engine if it's already shot or about to be. And I've recently checked, of course, on Audi's website, if I wanted to buy a brand new block, it's going to cost about $15,000. That would make absolutely no sense. But a used block with, say, 60,000 miles would cost about six grand, say, with shipping included. And so that might be an option I take if I really insist on getting this car back up and running. So this is our oil change kit. Bought this from FCP Euro. We, of course, have our washer, and I think this is a drain cap as well, and our filter. So the old one that's already in the car, we're going to take out and take apart to see just how much metal is in the oil, and that is being shed by the engine, whether it be from the heads, the valve train, or lower down, maybe across the crankshaft, or pistons, piston rings. I don't really know what we're gonna find in this engine because I've never owned an Audi with this many miles. So first things first, let's go ahead and jack the car back up for better access. I also have a surprise for you at the end of this video. You're actually sitting right next to it, at least the camera is, some new wheels and tires. Again, I've decided to go away from the OEM look, even though that was initially what I wanted, just because of availability and price. I found really sweet deals on Tire Rack, and I'm excited to fit these to the car and see how it looks with this body style and color. Time then for a basic oil service. We're going to start by draining the oil from underneath, visually inspecting it, and tearing apart the filter up top to see if it's caught anything suspicious. And I'm talking mainly about metal here. So far, it's dark, that's for sure. Likely hasn't been changed in several thousand miles, no surprise there, but nothing alarming. No coolant, no water, no milky sludge. Definitely lucky. The filter looks good so far, but if we find any iron filings with a magnet in the filter, then it's a pretty good sign we've excessive wear around the pistons, which could happen from oil starvation or sludge buildup. And thus far, we haven't found anything. This is great news. Phew, that is a big win. So nothing catastrophic on the engine side, at least from what we can see here in the filter. That doesn't preclude us from any timing chain issues though, which if you're familiar with these Audi engines, they are pretty notorious for. Now the later model year Audi S4s and 5s are not as prone to timing chain tensioner failure. The chains do become a bit stretched and the tensioners do wear in these engines. It's not like they fixed it entirely. That's kind of impossible. Given the mileage of this engine, that's the only other unknown here, and I don't really have like a specialty tool to check the amount of wear on the tensioner specifically and the amount of chain stretch. I'm just gonna assume that it's good enough because again, the engine runs and drives, but that is the big unknown, and it will continue to be the unknown until we get it diagnosed by a dealer or somebody with that special tool. For now though, we can go ahead and safely pop on the fresh filter along with the rubber O-rings. I also noticed that the drain plug at the bottom of the engine was different than the one that FCP sent me. I'm not sure, actually it's not FCP. Why am I saying FCP? It's ECS Tuning. So shout out to ECS Tuning. This came very quickly. I didn't pay extra for shipping. I showed up in like 2 days. Probably a product of my location, but something worth noting. Oh, you know what? I was wrong. Sorry
sorry ACS Tuning, you are in the clear. You sent the right thread, the right bolt, but the previous owner, one of them at least, swapped to one that includes an integrated magnet to catch all the file shavings. It's a quick way to diagnose if your engine is running very unhealthily. This is also clean, by the way. I noticed this stuck to the underside of the oil pan. I'm not sure why I didn't catch this sooner. But this is also clean, no metal shavings on this. I think we might be in the clear. Again, just based on the filter, this as well. The fact that the oil is dark but not filled with metal shavings, it's not super sparkly under the light, tells me that it's likely this engine was taken care of despite the heavy modifications. In fact, one could suggest that because of the heavy modifications, this engine was cared for. Obviously, it will undergo additional stress beyond factory specs because of the modifications, but this also requires a bit of additional diligence, and it looks like at least one of the owners was taking care of it. It's a bit different with this Audi engine. The O-ring is deep inside of this cap. I forgot there's actually another on the outside. I'm gonna use a plastic pry tool for this one. I don't want to scratch the housing. There we go. You see a much smaller one. Just gonna lube up the new ones with a bit of fresh oil before install. And in goes our fresh filter. This is always such a rewarding process, knowing that your engine will be fed fresh oil from here until, well, it's not fresh anymore.
Cleanup time down below. We'll get the drain plug and washer situated and then move to the top again where we'll be filling the engine with liquid moly 5W40, of course fully synthetic from ECS. There are a few different recommended oil blends online, but the higher weight in this one should be better suited for hot summer temps here in Central Florida. Further north, 0W40 may be better, especially in the winter, and to that end, I believe the OEM recommendation is Castrol 5W30 or 40 synthetic. Next up is the high pressure fuel pump and replacement sensor, which broke off during the crash. And I've never actually handled anything in a fuel system before, but it was pretty straightforward. If you're kind of mechanically savvy, this shouldn't be difficult at all, even if you've never done one before. One thing I quite love about working on cars is part number matching. I'm aware that probably sounds weird to lifelong mechanics out there, but there's something satisfying to me about being able to reference a part number for a quick replacement. It makes hunting online so much easier. A few bolts held the original high pressure fuel pump in place, and wrenches helped dislodge the various sensors and lines running to and from the unit. I used a small rag to catch any fuel in the lines, which will spray out if a car's recently been on, but other than that, there weren't any surprises. So far, so good. By the way, here's what the old sensor looked like post-crash. There was a small ribbon cable hanging onto the harness earlier, which is why the car, I imagine, was still able to run, but it completely broke once we started removing the front end. And as for the pump, it just looked gross. No idea if it ever been changed in the car's 140,000 miles or so, but I'm glad I now have peace of mind. Onto the supercharger then. Further disassembly will end up exposing the intake runners and valves, so I vacuumed up as much debris in these cracks and crevices as I could beforehand, and there was a lot of it. Remember, this thing was sitting for several months. And speaking of a lot, there were also tons of sensors and vacuum lines to disconnect from the top of the supercharger before I could even lift it up. Forget even one, and you could risk tearing a plug or cracking a pipe. So I took my time and lifted it out in stages. I imagine if I had to do this again, I would be much quicker. It also didn't help that the entire thing weighed somewhere north of 50 pounds, no joke, and had a strange center of gravity. Once it was out of the way, I shifted my attention to the lower intake manifolds or runners, one per bank. The fuel rails sat right under these and were sort of integrated, making disassembly a bit jarring. Mind you, I was doing this intuitively, or so I thought, and not by any sort of book or set of instructions, which may come back to bite me later. I just wanted enough remove to access the intake valves for the carbon cleaning, as well as the thermostat for replacement. A few extra goodies to remove along the way. This cracked coolant pipe, for one, we talked about this in an earlier video. One is already ordered for replacement, and the crank pulley assembly for two. And this one's integrated with the harmonic balancer, which which dampens the crankshaft's torsional vibrations. And of course, because why wouldn't it be, ours was virtually seized to the block thanks to rust and exposure after years and years of driving in cold, rain, snow, and salted roads. God, I hate salt. Thankfully though, just a few gentle taps with a rubber mallet and it broke free. We are well into day 2, and I've got to be perfectly honest with you all, this is a bit more than I bargained for. I am just kind of winging it. I've never disassembled an engine this far, ever. And so, I mean, it's not too bad to disassemble, right? It's like, again, it's like Lego. Like, taking something apart is not difficult, but reassembly is going to be the real trouble here. And I imagine it's going to be like building a Lego car without a decent set of instructions, which I would not wish on my worst enemy. So as you can see, it's pretty complex in there, and I don't know what I'm doing. So a bit of fueling basics for those who aren't aware of what you are looking at here. So this is a fuel rail, and this actually distributes fuel to the driver's side bank of cylinders. The other one is, where is it? Right here. Yep. So this is a very tedious thing. I've never done this before, and I just want to kind of show you some of the things I've noticed. So obviously we've got these O-rings inside of these little runners, and a couple of these fell out when I was popping this off, on both sides actually. So I wanted to make sure that I fished those out, because if we reassemble without those O-rings, we could potentially spray fuel into the V when the engine starts, and that could start a fire. That would not be fun. This is the high pressure fuel pump we just replaced. You can see there's a metal line that carries fuel all the way to the center of this V and then distributes it to both banks of cylinders. Now these here are our fuel injectors. This is a direct injected engine, which means that these injectors run straight to the combustion chamber, and well, that's partly why, mostly why, we have such bad carbon buildup. As you can see from these shots with my phone, the top sides of these cylinders are caked in this like black goo. It's mostly carbon, it's very sticky oftentimes, and it can reduce power output. It can cause other problems down the line as well. And these TFSI engines, anything from Volkswagen, Audi around this time period, these are notorious for such buildup. Now, had this engine, say, been port injected, or maybe let's say it had port and direct injection, then we would have had fuel being actively sprayed on the back sides of the intake valves during operation. And since fuel is a great solvent, it would have broken up any carbon buildup along the way. We don't have anything like that happening in this one, and that's why a carbon cleaning every, let's say 30-ish thousand miles, depending on how hard you drive the car, is required. So what you'll see in the next set of clips is a cheesy way of decarboning an engine. I don't want to buy the walnut blaster kit. I have a compressor and a vacuum, but I don't have the adapter either. You can buy these. They're not that expensive, but the entire kit can be upwards of $200-300, and I'm gonna do it the cheesy way to save $150 by just buying some liquid moly valve cleaner and using sets of zip ties to get in each runner and scrape away at the carbon. Then we'll use an oil extractor, which I already have, to suck out all of that debris, all that liquid. This also means we're gonna have to slowly turn the engine over as we progress through each of the sets of valves, because again, we need those valves to be seated upward. And I have a tool coming in for that. I didn't have that before. Apparently there's a tool that you can shove right into here and then slowly crank the engine over, which I think needs to be done in a clockwise rotation. So for some reason, people say rotating it counterclockwise is bad. It might have something to do with cam interference, whatever. They're only designed to rotate one way. I don't know. I'm just gonna make sure that I do it the way that everyone says online. Please, please, please wish me luck. Let's get to it. Time to get dirty. This procedure was very time consuming, and I lost about 20 towels in the process on account of all the carbon goo we ended up removing from the intake. Starting with these dividers, they were completely caked, and I ended up using valve cleaner and CLR to upend all of it. Manual scrubbing required. Now, just a reminder, again, this is where we're starting. Oh, and ignore the dirt that worked its way into these. We'll vacuum all of this out a bit later. So down goes the liquid moly valve cleaner. I left it to soak atop each set of valves for nearly an hour, and yes, I should have used a funnel, though it turns out this stuff works great for cleaning up carved up mating surfaces as well. Then came the zip ties, and yes, this does look a bit weird. These are supposed to agitate the tops of the valves, valve stems, and runners, though I found combining this with manual scrubbing and brushing worked so much better. Well, I was getting ready to install the new water pump, which I've just opened, and I noticed there were some scratches around the housing. Not a huge deal as long as it turns fine, but the inside is where the big issues arise. So you can see there, that impeller
is cracked, and that's unusable. So gotta get another one. So now I'm curious of the thermostat as well. You can see the part number there. So this was included as a bundle. It also came with some coolant, which we're not gonna need anytime soon, but yeah, it was a nice thought. Just wanna make sure that the thermostat is not also broken. So this is actually a plastic housing, which is probably more susceptible to damage. Although I will say this one doesn't look used. It doesn't look dinged up at all. So that's a good sign. And yeah, the valve looks good. It's fully seated. So I think we're okay, at least on this front. Maybe we can just get a quick water pump replacement from the seller. The delay as a result is my fault. I should have checked as soon as the box arrived. There are just so many in the garage right now, it's difficult to keep up. So this is where the thermostat sits. The old one, of course, is currently installed. Very easy to access once the supercharger is off. So just a few torque screws and we'll pop the new one in place. Now you can see the basics of a thermostat. Before we install this one, essentially coolant goes in one way, and if a certain temperature is reached, then the valve opens and that allows fluid to pass through for additional cooling. At least that's how I think this one works. One other failure point in these is the rubber gasket going all the way around the housing. If this wears away with time, heat, excessive force, etc., then you could have small leaks into the V of the engine and along the front of the block, which could cause belt squeak and other annoying things. You know, the phrase, "while I'm in here," is the bane of any car owner's existence, anyone that likes working on cars, but it would be a sin in my book to not replace something as simple as a thermostat once everything else is removed, and we already had to do that for the carbon cleaning, the water pump, and other issues with the front of the engine. Also, yes, we could be moving some of these vacuum lines out of the way as we go about disassembling this further and further, but I don't want to forget where any of this stuff goes. And there's a lot of lines, coolant lines, fuel stuff, obviously. These are the vacuum lines that run to, I believe, the intake runners under the supercharger. I don't even know what these do, but I don't want to touch them because there's no way I'm gonna remember where all this goes. Cables out of the way, these lines, and this should just pop right out like so. You can also see the O-ring that was left behind. We're gonna be replacing this, of course. And in goes the new one with the mating surface a bit cleaner than before. And now we carefully cross-tighten.
Next up, we'll attack the brakes, or the fronts at least. The rears involve an e-brake that we'll need to manually disengage with an OVD tool, which I do have, but there's no rush. The fronts are just easier. With new pads and rotors on deck, we'll kick things off by removing both front wheels, followed by retaining clips. I manually forced each caliper piston inward just enough to remove them from their respective rotors. These, again, were going to be replaced anyway, so I didn't mind cutting into these at all or making small grooves. Then we got to work on the brackets. These were heavily torqued down, as you might expect, somewhere in the realm of like 70 foot-pounds, but surprisingly weren't the worst part of this job. It was a bit awkward getting back here, but that award went to the rotors themselves, which were practically welded to their hubs on account of all the rust.
Oh, I cannot tell you how long I was hitting that rotor. These things are welded to the car, and again, it's just because they come from the salt belt, right? So where it snows a lot, they salt the roads. These things were, yeah, it's the most difficult part of this entire rebuild so far. Removing rusted rotors. So now we can finally take this rusty thing off. I mean, just look at that rust. This is literally falling apart. I'm really glad that I spent the $200 or $300 to get these replaced. Just sprayed some CLR on the hub just to get rid of some of the surface rust before we mount the new rotor. And we'll use a wire brush to scratch a lot of it away.
Brand new shiny rotors going in. This transformation was so satisfying to take part in. I've never actually done a full brake job before. I didn't want to say this beforehand, I didn't want you worrying, but the second set went on much quicker than the first, as is usually the case with car stuff, which also included a new brake pad wear sensor, just plug and play there. A bit of brake cleaner shined up the calipers, and we were squared away. This is gonna look so great when it's all said and done. Now with my attention back on the engine, the replacement water pump for the replacement water pump arrived. Shout out to the seller for, to his credit, sending out the replacement in one day to make things right. With a cleaned mating surface, this was set into place and bolted down with original hardware. As for the intake valves, again, just a reminder of where we started, and this is where we ended up after a few rounds of chemicals, manual scrubbing, and vacuuming. And look, I'm gonna take pride in this work. For my first ever attempt at something this jarring, I'd say it's a job well done. Certainly not perfect, and I know it's not. I've seen before and afters, especially when folks use the walnut blaster, which is the preferred method to easily do this job. But when I compare and contrast where we started with where we are now, I have no doubt the engine will fare better regardless. There's also something to be said about doing something yourself and learning so much in the process. Now, as a bit of an Easter egg, I decided to spend a few extra minutes fitting these replacement fenders to the sides of the car. Apologies for the lack of shirt, it was boiling in the garage around this time. The panels weren't snug at first and required some bending around their mounting points, but I'm super happy with how things turned out. The body lines along the passenger side are so clean, and I'm currently working toward the same outcome on the driver's side. The top end just needs to be pulled slightly upward, and we'll have another flush fit. Whew. It is hot for an evening, and again, I apologize for going shirtless. There's nothing for me to really show off here. I'm a toothpick, but it is a scorcher. We've been in a severe drought for several weeks here in Central Florida, and so the dust buildup, the heat, everything is just really been getting to me in this garage. So you saw about, I don't know, 10 or so minutes worth of clips, probably sped up, but this actually took place over about 7 days. It was a lot of work every day. I didn't feel like I was making a ton of progress, but it's important when it comes to bigger projects like this to sort of step back every now and then and just reflect on the work you've done. Think about things you might have messed up along the way, because I can tell you now that we've got the Supercharger remounted, which you didn't see in a sped up clip, it's gonna suck to have to go back in there to do anything. Any fueling work, high pressure side of the fueling system, that should all be taken care of now. I think I've taken care of it. I don't think I've missed anything. But again, if I have, it's gonna require another hour or two of work just to disassemble things on top of the fueling system to access. Same goes for the thermostat. I've gotten those bolts torqued down. Issue with the water pump though, one of its screws completely snapped off, and I think I was only aiming for about 30 foot-pounds or maybe 30 Newton meters, and that was the OEM torque spec for this water pump. So these bolts are just really old. They're sort of rusty. They've been exposed to the elements. I think I'm gonna go to the hardware store and buy a few dozen of those just to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And this is partly why we can't go any further yet. Until this is fully secured, I don't want to put on the replacement crank pulley. That of course is going to drive the alternator, the AC, that's going to drive, what else? I'm trying to think of anything else that would have been attached to, well, the water pump obviously, and we've got the cover for that to put on as well once these are tightened to spec. And then we're going to take care of the supercharger sides of things, the supercharger idler pulley. We've got replacement pulleys across the board. You can see this one right here was pretty chewed up. And so that's why I just went ahead and bought the whole smorgasbord of pulleys to make sure that these hold up and stand the test of time. You can see just how many connections there are behind this supercharger. This is one of the things I'm talking about. If I get any of this wrong, I mean, this wouldn't be as big a deal because it's all pretty easy to access. But, you know, we might have problems starting the car if and when that day comes. If any of this is missing, I've got to, just realized I've got one of these clamps here. I've got to pull all the way back to, I think this is a vacuum line. I honestly don't know what half of this stuff is. I'm just kind of, obviously this is the throttle body. This is where the air is going to be pulled into the supercharger. But I don't really know what all I had to connect back here to pull the supercharger off. Of course, this is where we changed the oil filter. There weren't any leaks around that housing, so I left that as is. But yeah, you can imagine if I did anything wrong on the fueling system side, for example, so that one line from the high pressure pump running underneath the supercharger would require completely removing the supercharger again to access, of course, near the intake runners, intake valves, and the fuel injectors. That is, that's not going to be a fun job to do again, and I can say that confidently because, well, I've already done it once. Elsewhere, pretty happy with the way the fenders have fit so far. Of course, I still need to do a bit of bending up top. The reason why these don't fit flush is probably one, due to shipping, and two, because these are not OEM fenders. I think they're from China, but they did have stock in the US, which allowed me to get these in like 3 days. And for about 200 bucks a piece, I'm not going to complain. We did a bit of bending on the other side, which again, I'll remind you how that looks. This is much cleaner. So the lines on this side are almost perfect. I'm very happy with this. I tend to refer to myself as a perfectionist, so there are a few exceptions to that rule, but this panel gap is so good, considering it didn't line up at all when we first got it. I was a bit worried. I was actually thinking about using the original fenders and just maybe doing some TIG welding or something to get the aluminum you know, back to square. Probably wouldn't have been possible. I don't really know what I'm doing there, but I was, yeah, a bit of a panic mode because these didn't fit very well. But once we torqued them down, we got them, of course, torqued through the door as well and along the bottom. Yeah, these lines look really good on this side. I'm sure we can do the same for the other. Now, I promised you some pretty sweet wheels. I'm gonna reveal those to you now. I know these are gonna be a bit polarizing. Some folks might not like this look, but I think they're gonna look awesome
on this S5. Say hello to this set of MSWs. So these are 20-inch rims, which is what I was after. Again, I wanted something close to the Audi RS5 rim size. The tires also should be in line with the OEM spec for an RS5. So these, I think, look so good. They almost remind me of kind of like a stock rim that you could find on, say, an Audi A6. I really like the multi-spoke look on Audis, as I said earlier, and that's exactly what I was going for with these. I'm probably going to pop out the logo, though, and replace those with the Audi one just to make it look a little more OEM. We have some Vredestein wheels, which I've never used on any car before, but I've heard good things about them, and I think I only paid about 210 bucks a tire, and that's for 265s squared all around. Remember, this is an all-wheel drive car, so all 4 tires are going to match. As for the color scheme, they have sort of like a painted gray interior, almost matching the Daytona gray on the S5, surprisingly, and then a machine finish. I'm a big sucker for machine finish rims. Have the exact same thing, more or less, on my 570S, in case you're wondering. Can't wait to fit the MSWs to the Audi, get this thing rolling again. It's been on jack stands and kind of backed up by hydraulic jacks on both sides for a good while we take care of the engine work. But once most of the engine stuff is done, actually I think right before we put the pulleys on, I'm gonna push it back into the driveway and give the engine a proper wash. I don't think I'm gonna power wash it, but I do wanna scrub it a bit more before the pulleys go on, just to make the engine block look a bit cleaner, so it hasn't been living in the salt belt for several years. But that is all for now. I think 7 days worth of work is good enough for a single video, although I have no idea how long this one's going to be. I wanna make sure that these are content rich. I don't want them to just be filled with fluff. There will be explanations. I know some of you like to skip through that stuff, and that's totally fine. If you just want to see the rebuilds, I want to have a fair share of both in these. So hopefully you've enjoyed them. If you have any tips, tricks, comments, things you've seen in the video that I should correct immediately, make sure to leave those in the comment section below. Again, thank you so much for clicking on these videos. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and to stick around for the next one. My name's Greg. Thanks for building with me.